The dawn light seeped through the worn curtains of the small bedroom, gently illuminating Abigail's weary face. She had been awake long before sunrise, as she had been every day for the past 25 years. Her eyes, marked by countless sleepless nights, carried a blend of exhaustion and unwavering determination. Moving silently, she rose from the bed, careful not to make any noise that might disturb William, who was still asleep in the adapted bed beside hers. The soft hum of the oxygen machine and the faint creak of the wheelchair had long since become a familiar backdrop to her mornings. Abigail made her way to the bathroom, quickly splashed water on her face, and returned to the room. Standing beside William, she paused for a moment to watch him. His face looked peaceful, a rare occurrence during the day. With gentle hands, she adjusted the pillow beneath his head and prepared to transfer him to the wheelchair. "Good morning, my love," Abigail whispered as she leaned in to kiss his forehead. William slowly opened his eyes, and despite the ever-present weariness in his expression, a soft smile emerged. "You don't have to wake up so early, Abby. I'm already enough of a burden in your life," he said with a mix of humor and quiet melancholy. "Don't say such nonsense, William," she replied with a tender smile, masking the fatigue in her voice. "You know my day doesn't truly begin until I see that lazy smile of yours." The process of lifting him from the bed was always delicate. Abigail used a small, time-worn manual hoist to help with the transfer. Each movement required strength and precision, but she carried out the routine seamlessly, as if her life had been orchestrated around these familiar motions. In the kitchen, breakfast was nearly ready. The old toaster hissed and sputtered while Abigail stirred eggs in the skillet. William, seated in his wheelchair at the table, watched her intently. "You make everything look so effortless, Abby," he said, his voice tinged with guilt. I don't know how you managed to keep going through it all." Abigail paused, turning to face him. "Because I love you, William. Isn't that what we promised at the altar? In sickness and in health. You'd do the same for me," she said firmly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness. As they ate in silence, Abigail began mentally organizing the day ahead. There were bills to pay, groceries to buy, and William's physical therapy session. Money was always tight, and she sacrificed much to ensure he never went without. After breakfast, while Abigail washed the dishes, William broke the silence. "Sometimes I think you deserve more. More than this. More than what I can give you now." She stopped scrubbing the plate, her eyes fixed on the sink. For a moment, the sound of running water was the only thing filling the air. Then, taking a deep breath, she turned to him, smiling. "The only thing I deserve is the love you've always given me. That's more than enough for me." The day continued with Abigail's unwavering dedication. Between changing sheets, managing medications, and preparing meals, she made it a point to sit beside William, holding his hand for a few minutes and sharing stories about the little things happening in the neighborhood. Even amidst exhaustion, she found moments of tenderness to remind them both that their love, though tested, was what kept them together. As night fell, Abigail, drained but content, sat beside William, listening to the soft sound of his breathing. The unconditional love she carried was the force that kept her going, even when it felt like there was nothing left. The morning was particularly cold, and Abigail used the time to do a deep clean of the house. The room she and William had shared for years had accumulated old items. Among boxes of clothes that no longer fit and drawers full of yellowed papers, something in the back of the closet caught her attention. It was a small, sturdy wooden box with a discreet lock. "What's this?" she murmured to herself, pulling the box out. It had an aged appearance but was well preserved, as if someone had gone to great lengths to protect it. Abigail held it for a moment, examining it. She turned toward the living room, where William was watching TV. The distance between them felt greater in that moment, a strange sensation, as though something invisible separated her from her husband. "William, do you know what this is?" she asked, walking into the room with the box in her hands. He glanced at it briefly, and the change in his expression was immediate. His usually calm eyes widened, and he quickly looked away, almost instinctively. "Oh, it's probably just some old junk. I don't even remember that. Why not throw it out?" he said, trying to sound indifferent, but there was a slight tremor in his voice. Abigail noticed the discomfort. She knew every nuance in William's tone, every expression. Something was off. "Old junk, huh?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "So you won't mind if I open it?" "I don't have the key," he replied quickly, his voice firmer now. "It probably got lost years ago. There's nothing important in there." Abigail kept her gaze on him for a few seconds. Her heart began to race, but she didn't let it show. I see. "I'll just leave it in the bedroom then," she said, turning slowly. However, as soon as she got back to the bedroom, she knew she wouldn't be able to let it go. The box seemed to call out to her, almost like a hidden secret refusing to stay buried. After a few minutes of searching, she found a small key in an old drawer that looked like it might fit. Her hands trembled as she turned the key in the lock. The sound of the click echoed in the empty room. Abigail lifted the lid to reveal a stack of neatly folded papers. Her heart tightened as she caught a faint trace of a familiar perfume still clinging to them. She picked up the first letter, unfolding it slowly. "My dearest William, I can't wait for us to be together again. Every moment by your side makes me dream of the day we won't have to hide anymore." Abigail's voice silently read the passage, but the impact was devastating. Her fingers trembled, and the letter nearly slipped from her hands. She picked up another and then another, each carrying the same tone of passion, filled with declarations of love from a woman who signed only as Claire. "What is this?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Abigail sat on the bedroom floor, the letters scattered around her like pieces of a puzzle she never wanted to solve. The silence in the house felt suffocating, and her mind involuntarily dragged her to memories that now carried an unbearable weight. She held one of the letters, reading Claire's affectionate words. The sentences were so intimate, so full of passion, that the intensity of their relationship was undeniable. Abigail closed her eyes, and a scene from years ago began to form in her mind. It was a sunny day, and William had been on the phone in the backyard while she prepared lunch in the kitchen. He seemed nervous, pacing back and forth. She remembered glancing out the window, noticing how he gestured, speaking quickly as though he wanted to end the call as soon as possible. "Who were you talking to?" Abigail had asked when he came into the kitchen. "Oh, just work," William replied, flashing a quick smile as he grabbed a glass of water. The usual problems. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. William had always been private about work, and she trusted him. But now, replaying that day in her mind, his hurried tone and forced smile took on a new meaning. Abigail picked up another letter, this one older, and her hands shook as she read, "My sweet William, life without you feels empty. Every moment with you is an escape from reality, a place where I can truly be myself. Forever yours, Claire." Her stomach twisted into a knot. How had she missed the signs? The little delays, the excuses about extended meetings, even the unfamiliar scent on his clothes. It all made sense now. Back then, she had chosen to believe it was her imagination. Rising to her feet, Abigail walked into the living room where William sat in his wheelchair. He was staring at the TV, but his gaze seemed distant, as if he knew the confrontation was inevitable. "William, we need to talk," she said firmly, holding one of the letters in her hand. He looked at her and sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that carries an unbearable burden. "I already know what you're going to say." "Oh, you do? Then why don't you tell me, William? Tell me what these letters mean." Abigail threw the letter onto his lap, her voice trembling with rage and pain. He held the paper for a moment, unable to meet her eyes. "It was before the accident, Abigail. Long before. I didn't know how to tell you." "How to tell me?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the room. "You didn't know how to tell me you had another woman? That while I believed I was the love of your life, you were in someone else's arms?" "It wasn't like that," he replied, finally lifting his eyes to meet hers. I loved you, Abigail, but Claire came into my life during a complicated time. I was a fool, I know. I never planned for it to happen, and by the time I realized, it was too late." "Too late?" Abigail laughed, but it was a bitter laugh laced with tears. "Do you know what too late is, William? It's spending 25 years of my life taking care of a man I thought loved me, only to find out he's been hiding secrets like this." He tried to move his wheelchair closer, but she stepped back as though his proximity was unbearable at that moment. "Abigail, you have every right to be angry, but you need to understand. After the accident, everything changed. I realized it was you I needed, the one I truly loved." "Of course, it's easy to say that now," she snapped. "If I was the only fool who believed we were happy while you were out betraying me." She pointed a trembling finger at him. "Don't you dare use the accident as an excuse, William. Don't erase what you did before, and don't try to convince me that just because you became dependent, everything you did before simply vanished." Silence fell between them. William seemed smaller, almost shrunken in his chair, while Abigail took a deep breath, trying to control the tears that insisted on falling. The pain she felt was overwhelming, but deep down, what tormented her most was the uncertainty about what to do with this truth. "I never wanted to hurt you, Abigail," he said, his voice choked. "I know I was a terrible husband in the past, But these years with you, these years were built on a lie, William, she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. And I don't know if I can live with that. Without waiting for a response, Abigail turned and left the room, leaving William alone with his guilt and regret. In the bedroom, she collapsed onto the bed, clutching the letters to her chest as memories of the past continued to haunt her. Abigail sat in the worn armchair by the bed, the wooden box still by her side. The weight of the letters, now read and reread, seemed to grow heavier by the second, suffocating her. Her heart was torn between anger and sadness, but above all, she felt an immense confusion. Memories of her life with William, both before and after the accident, swirled in her mind like an endless storm. She glanced at the window, seeing her reflection in the glass. The woman staring back at her looked tired, but different. It was as if the Abigail who always put everyone else's needs before her own was starting to fade, making room for someone she didn't yet recognize. The sound of the wheelchair approaching pulled her from her thoughts. William entered the room, his movements slow and deliberate. He stopped near the bed, looking at her with a mixture of guilt and fear. "Abigail, can we talk?" She looked up, her eyes still red from crying, but now resolute. "What's left to say, William? You've hidden so much from me. I don't even know if I can bear to hear anything else." "I know what I did was unforgivable," he began, taking a deep breath. "But these years, the last 25 years, I've tried to be a better man for you. I know I failed before, but everything I've done since the accident has been for us." Abigail let out a bitter laugh, devoid of any humor. "For us? Do you really believe that? You think hiding your past was for us? Or was it just for you to ease your conscience while I wore myself out taking care of you?" "It wasn't like that, Abigail," he said, his voice breaking. "I was scared of losing you, scared that if you found out you'd leave me." She cut him off, rising from the armchair. "And don't you see? By hiding it, you stole my chance to choose. You took away my right to decide whether I wanted to stay by your side or not." Her voice trembled with emotion as she stood, her hands clenched. "I had a life too." William lowered his head, unable to respond. The silence between them was deafening. Abigail began pacing the room, her steps quick and tense. "I lost my youth, William," she said, finally stopping and facing him. "I devoted myself to you, sacrificed my dreams, my future, all because I believed in us, and now I don't even know what's real anymore." He looked at her, his eyes brimming with tears. "Do you still love me, Abigail?" The question caught her off guard. For a moment she stood still, staring at him, as if the answer lay somewhere deep inside her, waiting to be uncovered. I don't know," she admitted, her voice low, almost a whisper. "I don't know what I feel anymore." She sat down again, crossing her arms as if trying to shield herself. "I've spent so much time taking care of you that I forgot about myself. Now for the first time I'm asking, who is Abigail? What do I want?" William tried to move closer, but she raised her hand to stop him. "No, William, this isn't something you can fix with words. This is my battle. Abigail, please, don't give up on us," he pleaded, his voice breaking. She looked at him for a long time, her tears falling silently. "Maybe I gave up a long time ago and just didn't realize it until now." The night fell, and Abigail remained in the room, alone, staring into the void. For the first time, she considered the possibility of a different life, one where she wasn't bound to the past or the expectations she had imposed on herself. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to live for herself. Morning arrived with a different kind of silence in Abigail's house. The chirping of birds seemed louder, as if even nature was waiting for the resolution of this conflict. Abigail had spent the night awake, sitting on her bed, her eyes fixed on the letters that had revealed so many truths. She knew that this day would be decisive, but for the first time she felt a strange calm amid the chaos. She got up, fixed her hair, and went downstairs. William was in the living room, as usual, waiting for her to help him with breakfast. When she entered, he noticed something different. Abigail seemed stronger, more determined, and he didn't know what to expect. "William," she said, her voice calm but filled with intensity, "we need to talk." He nodded, nervous but aware that he couldn't avoid what was coming. "Of course, Abigail, I'm here to listen." She sat across from him, looking directly into his eyes. There was something in her gaze that was both sorrowful and resolute. "I've spent hours thinking about us, about me, about everything we built and everything that was destroyed." William took a deep breath, bracing himself for the worst. "Abigail, before you say anything, I want you to know how deeply sorry I am. There's no excuse for what I've done, but "No," she interrupted, raising her hand. I don't need more apologies. What I need is for you to listen this time. He nodded, swallowing the words he was about to speak. For 25 years I devoted my life to you. I sacrificed everything because I believed in the love we shared. And during that time I forgot who I was, who I could be. These letters, she glanced at the table where the open box rested. These letters showed me that even you weren't the man I thought you were. William lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. But that doesn't mean I'm lost forever, she continued. I've realized something important, William. The love I had for you was real. It made me strong. It kept me going when everything felt impossible. But now I need to love myself. William looked up, a tear rolling down his cheek. So, what does that mean? Are you going to leave me? Abigail was silent for a moment, as if carefully choosing her words. I'm not going to abandon you, William. That's not who I am, but things are going to change. I can't keep living just for you. I need to find what makes me happy, what gives me purpose. And how can I help with that? He asked, his voice weak, almost a whisper. You can start by giving me space, she replied, her smile faint but genuine. I want to take back my life. I want to do things for myself, because of myself. That doesn't mean I don't care about you, but it does mean you won't be the center of everything I do. William seemed to absorb her words slowly. He knew he had no right to ask for anything more, but the fear of losing her entirely consumed him. You're the most incredible woman I've ever known, Abigail, he said at last, and if that means you need space, I'll give it to you. I just hope that in the end, there's still a place for me in your life. She sighed, standing and walking over to him. Abigail placed her hand gently over his, a gesture that carried both affection and farewell. That depends on you, William. Forgiveness is a long road, and I don't know where it will lead me. But for the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm in control of my own life. She left the room, leaving William alone with his thoughts. But this time, there was no anger or bitterness in her heart, only a newfound sense of freedom she had never felt before. As she walked into the garden where the sunlight shone brightly, Abigail felt something new, hope. Hope that at last, she was living her own story. The sun was about to set, painting the horizon with shades of orange and pink. Abigail sat on a small wooden porch, surrounded by a garden she had cultivated with her own hands. Every flower held a story. Every plant reflected her journey. In her hands, she held a cup of tea, the steam rising slowly as she gazed at the horizon with a serene smile. Who would have thought I'd end up here, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. The sound of soft footsteps behind her caught her attention. It was Sarah, her 8-year-old granddaughter, with a mischievous grin on her face. Grandma, you're always out here when the sun sets. What are you thinking about? Abigail chuckled softly, setting her cup aside and pulling Sarah to sit beside her. I think about how life is full of twists and turns, my little one, and how we can find strength where we thought there was none. Sarah tilted her head, puzzled. It's about Grandpa William, isn't it? Abigail smiled, a smile filled with memories. Yes, it's about him, and about me too. Years had passed since the day Abigail decided her life needed a change. After dedicating time to herself, exploring new hobbies, making friends, and even traveling to places she had always dreamed of, she and William found a new kind of balance. He acknowledged his flaws, and over time, they rediscovered something different, something more honest. Abigail sighed, looking at Sarah. You know, your grandfather was a complicated man. He made mistakes, many mistakes, but he was also capable of love. What I learned is that no matter what others do, the most important thing is how you choose to respond. Sarah furrowed her brow, trying to understand. So, did you forgive him? Abigail was silent for a moment, gazing at the sky. Yes, I forgave him, but not for what he did. I forgave him for myself. Forgiveness isn't something you give to others. It's something you do to set yourself free. Sarah seemed satisfied with the answer and ran off to play in the garden, leaving Abigail alone with her thoughts. Minutes later, a familiar sound echoed through the house. William's voice, now softer with age, calling for her. Abigail, are you there? I'm here, William, she replied, rising slowly and walking inside. William sat in his wheelchair, but his eyes still sparkled with a vitality that belied his years. It's getting cold out there. Why don't you come in and rest a bit? Abigail walked over to him, gently placing her hand on his. I was just thinking about how lucky I am to be here, with everything I've built. He smiled, gripping her hand firmly. And I'm grateful every day that you didn't give up on me. Abigail didn't respond. She just smiled, a smile that conveyed everything words could never express. As night fell, Abigail felt a profound sense of peace. She had faced life's toughest challenges, battled heartache and doubt, and emerged stronger. The woman who stood there, in the small house with the blooming garden, was someone who had chosen freedom, forgiveness, and most importantly, herself. And as the sound of Sarah's laughter filled the air, Abigail knew without a doubt that she had found her way to happiness.